I never thought I'd find myself in this position, sitting in my car in the office parking lot, gripping my phone with trembling hands, staring at my wife through the window of a nearby cafe. It felt surreal, like a scene from one of those late-night dramas, but this time, I wasn't a viewer. I was living it. It all started a week ago. My wife, Anna, had been acting strange lately, working late more often, suddenly glued to her phone, and avoiding eye contact when I asked her about it. The gut feeling that something wasn't right gnawed at me until I decided to dig deeper. That morning, Anna mentioned she'd be pulling overtime at the office, which wasn't unusual for her line of work. But instead of heading home after my own shift, I drove straight to her office building. I didn't know what I was hoping to find. Maybe reassurance that I was just being paranoid. What I saw through the cafe window shattered me. There she was, sitting across from a man I'd never seen before. Her face lit up with a smile I hadn't seen in months, her hand gently brushing against his on the table. He leaned in closer, whispering something that made her laugh, completely at ease, completely unaware that I was watching. I felt like a fool. My heart raced, my thoughts spiraled, and anger bubbled up inside me. I couldn't just sit there and watch this unfold. I needed to do something. That's when an idea hit me. If my wife didn't have the decency to tell this man she was married, then I would. I searched for the cafe's phone number, called it, and asked to be connected to a man sitting with a woman wearing a navy blazer. The line went quiet for a moment, and I watched as the server approached their table and handed him the phone. "Hello," he said cautiously. I didn't waste time. "Hi there. I'm sorry to interrupt your date, but you should know something important. The woman you're sitting with is my wife." I could see him freeze through the window, his expression going from confusion to shock. Anna's face paled as he slowly turned to look at her. For the first time in weeks, she looked panicked, caught. "Who is this?" he asked again, his voice rising slightly. "I'm her husband," I replied coldly. "It seems you weren't aware of that, but now you are." Anna snatched the phone from his hand and looked around the cafe in a panic, searching for me. I ducked back into my car, my heart pounding in my chest as I watched her scramble to explain herself to the stranger. The man stood abruptly, shaking his head, clearly disgusted as he grabbed his coat and left her sitting there, alone and humiliated. I didn't stick around to hear her excuses or watch her unravel further. I drove away, feeling a mixture of rage, relief, and sadness. When Anna got home later that night, she didn't try to deny it. She knew she was caught. I listened to her weak excuses, her half-hearted apologies, but I couldn't unsee what I'd seen. The truth was out, and there was no going back. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out where it all went wrong. The silence in the house that night was deafening. Anna tried to speak to me a few times, offering explanations that held no weight. It was just a mistake. It didn't mean anything. I felt disconnected from you. Each sentence chipped away at what little patience I had left. I finally turned to her, my voice low but sharp. "A mistake? You were holding his hand, laughing like everything was perfect. Don't tell me it was meaningless." She opened her mouth to reply, but no words came. Instead, she sank into the chair across from me, tears silently streaming down her face. I didn't care. Maybe that made me cold, but after what I'd seen, I wasn't ready to feel pity. "You didn't even respect me enough to hide it properly," I added. "You took him to a place close to your office, a place you knew I could show up. Were you even trying to cover your tracks, or did you think I was too stupid to find out?" "Please," she whispered. "I know I messed up, but But what, Anna?" I interrupted. "You didn't think about me? About us? Or was it easier to pretend I didn't exist when you were with him?" Her sobs grew louder, but I stood up, unwilling to sit through another second of her excuses. I grabbed a pillow and blanket from the hall closet and went straight to the couch. The next few days passed in a blur. We barely spoke, moving around the house like strangers. I found myself replaying the scene over and over again, the way she smiled at him, the way she looked so happy. That part hurt the most. One evening, as I sat alone in the living room, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. I didn't know she was married. "I'm sorry. I stared at the screen, realizing it must be the man from the cafe. He must have gotten my number from Anna or found it another way. A part of me wanted to ignore him, but my curiosity got the better of me. I replied, "How long had you been seeing her?" The response came quickly. "A few months." She told me she was single and recently out of a long-term relationship. "I had no idea about you." Months. The word stung like a dagger. This wasn't some meaningless mistake. It was ongoing. Calculated. The man sent one more message before I could respond. "I don't want to cause any more problems for you. I just thought you should know. I'm done with her." I tossed my phone onto the table and ran my hands through my hair, anger bubbling up all over again. It wasn't just betrayal. It was deception, and it went on far longer than I had imagined. That night, I confronted Anna again. "Months, Anna? You were seeing him for months?" She looked shocked. "How did you?" "He texted me," I said bluntly. "He told me everything." "You told him you were single. How do you think that makes me feel? My wife, parading around as someone else's girlfriend while I'm at home wondering where you are?" She started to cry again, but this time I didn't care. I was too far gone to be swayed by tears. "I can't do this anymore," I said, my voice steady but cold. "I don't know who you are, and I don't think I want to." Her face crumpled as I turned away and headed to the guest room, shutting the door behind me. In the days that followed, I started to piece my life back together. I focused on work, spent more time with friends, and eventually told my family the truth. Most of them were shocked. They always thought Anna and I were the perfect couple. Anna tried reaching out to me a few times after I moved out. Long messages, apologies, promises to change, but I didn't respond. I'd already made up my mind. Some betrayals cut too deep to repair. The man she was seeing never reached out again after that text, and honestly, I didn't care to know more about him. He wasn't the problem, Anna was. She was the one who made the choice to lie, to cheat, to betray the trust we'd built. As time passed, the anger faded, replaced by a kind of calm acceptance. I realized that catching her that day, as painful as it was, had been a blessing in disguise. I deserved better, and now I had the chance to find it. One evening, as I sat on the balcony of my new apartment, watching the sunset, I thought about everything that had happened. The betrayal, the confrontation, the heartbreak. It all seemed so far away now. In the end, Anna's affair taught me something valuable. Never ignore the gut feeling that something isn't right. Trust yourself, even when it hurts. And most importantly, know when to walk away. Months passed, and life began to feel normal again, or at least my version of normal. My days were filled with work, occasional nights out with friends, and weekends spent rediscovering old hobbies I'd neglected during my marriage. For the first time in years, I felt like I had control over my life again. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. Anna's name still popped up in my messages now and then. She didn't bombard me, but every so often, she'd send something small. Asterisk, asterisk, I miss you. Asterisk, asterisk, or can we talk? As if testing the waters to see if I'd respond. I never did. I'd made my decision, and I was determined to stick to it. One evening, I got home from work and opened the mailbox to find a letter with Anna's handwriting on the envelope. I stared at it for a long moment before taking it inside. My first instinct was to tear it up, but curiosity got the better of me. I sat down on the couch, slowly unfolding the paper. The letter was short, but heavy with regret. Asterisk, I know you hate me, and I probably deserve it. I've spent months trying to figure out how I could do what I did to you. There's no excuse, and I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I'm trying to change. I'm seeing a therapist. I'm confronting the person I let myself become, and it's ugly. You didn't deserve what I did to you. You were a good husband. I threw it all away, and I'll regret that for the rest of my life. I hope one day you find happiness again. Real happiness, with someone who appreciates you the way I should have. Asterisk. I folded the letter and set it aside, unsure how I felt. For so long, I'd been carrying this anger like it was the only thing keeping me moving forward. But reading those words, I didn't feel satisfaction or vindication. I just felt tired. I didn't hate her anymore. I thought I would, but I didn't. What she did was unforgivable, but holding on to that anger wouldn't undo the past. It would only keep me trapped there. I decided then that I wouldn't let her mistake define me anymore. I was done carrying the weight of it. A year later, I found myself at a small coffee shop downtown. It had become my weekend ritual, grabbing a coffee and sitting by the window with a book. I'd grown to enjoy the simplicity of it, the quiet moments I'd once taken for granted. That's when I noticed her, someone new. She walked in wearing a green coat, her dark hair pulled into a loose bun, ordering her coffee with a smile that seemed to brighten the room. She glanced my way and gave me a polite nod before settling at a table nearby. I returned the gesture, feeling a flicker of something I hadn't felt in a long time. After a while, she caught me staring, more than once, and laughed softly as our eyes met. On her way out, she paused by my table. "You know, you're not very good at being subtle," she said, a teasing smile on her lips. Caught off guard, I chuckled, feeling heat rise to my face. "I'm usually better at it. Must be off my game today." "Well, you're lucky I don't mind." She handed me a napkin with her number scribbled on it before walking out the door, leaving me stunned and smiling like an idiot. For the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful, like maybe this was the beginning of something new. Something better. As I slipped the napkin into my pocket, I realized that life has a funny way of working out. Sometimes, you have to go through the worst heartbreak to learn how strong you are and to make space for something real. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure. I was ready to find out. Over the next few days, that napkin sat on my nightstand. Every time I glanced at it, I felt a mix of excitement and hesitation. After everything I'd been through, the idea of opening up to someone new felt foreign, like stepping onto thin ice and hoping it didn't crack beneath me. But that small flicker of hope wouldn't let me ignore it. Finally, on a quiet Wednesday evening, I decided to take the leap. I sat on the edge of my bed, phone in hand, and typed out a message. "Hi, it's the guy who's bad at being subtle. I hope you didn't regret handing me that napkin. How about a coffee? This time my treat?" I hovered over the send button, my thumb trembling slightly before pressing it. Within minutes, a reply came through. "I was beginning to think you'd lost it. Coffee sounds great. How about Saturday?" A grin spread across my face as I typed back a quick, perfect. It was simple, but after everything I'd been through, simple felt good. Saturday arrived quicker than I expected. I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting my shirt for what must have been the 5th time. It had been years since I'd been on a first date, and I felt ridiculous worrying about every little detail. But when I showed up at the cafe and saw her sitting there, smiling as she looked up from her book, I realized none of that mattered. "Hey," I said, feeling a little breathless. "Hey yourself," she replied, closing her book and standing to greet me. "You're not late, so you're already off to a good start?" We laughed, and any awkwardness I'd been expecting melted away as we settled into a conversation that felt natural, effortless even. Her name was Emily. She worked as an editor for a publishing house and had a love for books that matched mine. We talked about everything: our favorite authors, her love of hiking, my attempts at learning to cook, and the absurdity of dating in this day and age. At one point, she tilted her head and asked, "So, what's your story? You seem guarded, but I can tell there's more to you than meets the eye." I hesitated, my mind flashing back to Anna, to that cafe window, to the months I spent picking up the pieces. For a moment, I considered brushing it off with a vague answer, but something about Emily made me want to be honest. "I went through a divorce not too long ago," I admitted, meeting her eyes. "It wasn't pretty. I found out my ex-wife was cheating on me." Emily didn't flinch. She just nodded thoughtfully, her expression soft. "That must have been really hard." "It was," I said, exhaling slowly. "But I've learned from it. I'm not the same person I was then." "That's a good thing, isn't it?" she said with a smile. "The tough stuff has a way of teaching us what we're really capable of." "Yeah," I replied, feeling a weight lift off my chest. "It does." The rest of the afternoon flew by. I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt so comfortable with someone, like I could just be myself without worrying about what came next. As we walked out of the cafe, She turned to me with that same teasing smile I remembered from our first encounter. So, what now? Do I have to wait for another napkin to hear from you again? I laughed. No napkins this time. I'll call. I promise. She gave me a playful look before heading off down the street, leaving me standing there with a stupid grin on my face. For the first time in a long time, I felt something real, a connection that didn't come with lies or betrayal. In the weeks that followed, Emily and I grew closer. It wasn't perfect. We both had our walls and our scars, but we respected that about each other. She didn't push me to share more than I was ready for, and I gave her the same space in return. What mattered was that we were building something together, one step at a time. I thought about Anna less and less as time went on. Not because I'd forgotten, but because I'd finally let go. She became a part of my past, a chapter I'd closed to make room for something new. One evening, as Emily and I sat on my balcony watching the sunset, she leaned her head against my shoulder and sighed contentedly. You know, she said softly, I think you're one of the strongest people I've ever met. Me? I asked, laughing lightly. I don't feel that way sometimes. You are, she insisted. Most people let heartbreak break them. But you didn't. You found a way to start over, and that's not easy. I didn't know how to respond to that, so I just squeezed her hand, feeling grateful for her for this moment and for the chance to start again. Maybe life really did have a funny way of working out. Sometimes, the pain we go through isn't the end of our story. It's just the beginning of something better. And as I sat there with Emily, watching the sky turn shades of gold and crimson, I realized that I was exactly where I was meant to be. The weeks turned into months, and my life with Emily began to feel like the start of something real, something I hadn't dared to believe in again. It wasn't flashy or dramatic like those movie love stories. It was steady, simple, and genuine. We took things slow, savoring the small moments. Sunday hikes where she'd always end up ahead of me, teasing me about how out of shape I was. Late nights spent curled up on the couch with books and cups of tea. Even grocery shopping became an adventure with Emily, as she'd toss random items into the cart just to see if I'd notice. One night, after dinner at her place, I found myself looking around her apartment. The photographs on the walls, the overflowing bookshelves, the little details that made it her. I realized I hadn't felt this kind of peace in years. She caught me staring and raised an eyebrow. What's on your mind? She asked softly. I hesitated, not because I didn't want to answer, but because I wasn't used to feeling so exposed. I'm just happy. Her lips curved into a smile as she stepped closer. That's a good thing, right? Yeah, I said, smiling back. A really good thing. And it was. But life has a funny way of testing you just when you think you've moved on. One Saturday afternoon, Emily and I were at a farmer's market, picking out fresh produce. The air was warm, and she was debating with a vendor about whether tomatoes were technically a fruit. I laughed, watching her charm the man into giving us a discount. That's when I saw her. Anna. She was standing a few stalls away, holding a small basket of fruit, her face half hidden behind sunglasses. For a moment, I thought I was imagining her. But then she turned and our eyes met. My stomach dropped. It felt like a ghost had walked straight into my new life. She froze too, clearly surprised to see me. She looked different, thinner, maybe tired. I couldn't help but notice she was alone. No stranger by her side this time. Emily must have noticed the change in me, because she glanced up from her tomatoes and followed my gaze. Who's that? She asked quietly. I hesitated, my throat tightening. That's my ex-wife. Emily's expression softened, and she simply nodded. Do you want to leave? No, I said quickly, shaking my head. I'm fine. Anna seemed to debate whether to come over, and for a moment, I thought she wouldn't. But then she started walking toward us, her steps slow and unsure. I braced myself, unsure what to expect. Hi, she said softly when she reached us. Hi, I replied, my voice steady, though my heart was racing. There was a long pause before Anna glanced at Emily and offered a polite smile. I'm Anna, she said, introducing herself. Emily extended a hand, her smile warm but cautious. Emily. It's nice to meet you. Anna looked back at me, her expression conflicted. You look good, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Happy? I am, I said simply. Her lips quivered for a second before she nodded, as if she were trying to hold back whatever emotions she was feeling. I'm glad, she replied softly. Really? The silence stretched awkwardly before she added, I should go. I didn't mean to interrupt. You didn't, I said, though part of me was relieved that she was leaving. Anna lingered for a moment longer, looking like she wanted to say something else, but instead, she turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Emily looped her arm through mine as we watched her go. Are you okay? I took a deep breath and let it out slowly.
Yeah.
I am. And for the first time in a long time, I realized I meant it. Seeing Anna hadn't reopened any wounds. It hadn't shattered the peace I'd built for myself. If anything, it confirmed what I already knew. I'd moved on. Emily gave my arm a gentle squeeze. Come on, she said, steering me toward a nearby stall. I need to find strawberries before that guy over there buys them all. I laughed, grateful for her ability to keep me grounded, and let her pull me along. That night, as we sat on my balcony with a glass of wine each, Emily broke the quiet. Can I ask you something? She said, her voice careful. Of course. When you saw her today, what did it make you feel? I thought about it for a moment, choosing my words carefully. It made me realize how far I've come. I don't hate her anymore, and I'm not angry. She made her choices and they hurt, but they don't define me anymore. Emily nodded, seeming satisfied with my answer. That's good. I think it's important to let the past be the past. Exactly, I said, reaching for her hand. Because the present feels pretty damn good. She smiled, leaning in to kiss me softly, and in that moment, I knew I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The past had shaped me, but it no longer owned me. And for the first time in my life, I was free.